Get ready. We're going to have an amazing panel discussion now on such an important topic that has been coming up all morning, which is about advocating for yourself, advocating for career advancement, and advocating for work-life balance and everything in between. So I'm going to hand this over to Senne, who's the head of advice and solutions at RBC Wealth Management. Anne, thank you. Please take it away.
Thank you, Romy. It's such a pleasure to be here with you all today. As Romy said, my name is Senne, and I'm the head of advice and solutions for RBC Wealth Management. And I am joining you here from sunny Hilton Head, South Carolina, where we're hosting the RBC Heritage Golf Tournament starting tomorrow. But I didn't want to miss this session, and listening to Michelle in the previous session was just amazing. She's a tough act to follow, but I'm very excited for you to hear from the panelists and when we talk about advocating for yourself. This topic is near and dear to my heart as a manager, as a mentor, and as a parent. I'm often in the position of advocating for others, and I love to do it. I love to champion those around me, lifting others up as you rise, as we were talking about. But while we all love to take care of others, and I know you can relate, sometimes that means putting ourselves last. And we really do need to make sure that we're speaking up for ourselves and we're advocating for ourselves in our careers, especially right now. As we begin to emerge from the pandemic, we're in another period of transition, and might I say this one might be even harder than it was to transition to remote, with many different people shifting to hybrid work schedules, some days in the office, some days at home. Others are going to be fully virtual, and some are going to be fully in the office. So we're going to have a lot of different ways to work that we're going to be managing. It makes that even more challenging to be visible and to advocate. So that's why it's so important. And that's why I'm so excited to take on this discussion with these amazing women today. They have some terrific insights that they'll share on the call. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our panelists, and then I'd ask each of you to please introduce yourself. So we have Christina Bosserd. She's the Senior Vice President of Internal Audit at Eaton. Mica, Mayo, VP of Operations, Digital Innovation and Transformation at ServiceNow. And Stacy, Lynett, VP of Digital Business Software at General Motors, excuse me. Sorry about that, Stacy. So any opening comments from you in terms of introducing each of yourselves? Maybe we'll start with you, Christina.
Thanks, Anne. I appreciate the introduction. So yes, Christina Bosserd, and I'm the Senior Vice President of Internal Audit, as Anne said. I've been with Eaton for about 18 years. So actually my entire career has been with Eaton. Actually started as an intern in one of the facilities in Mississippi. So it's been a pretty long career for me, various different roles in the finance function, and then recently moved into this role in October. I also have the privilege in Eaton of leading our women's employee resource group. And then on the personal side, I am a wife and mother of 3 kids that are 9, 6, and 4. So we have we're in that fun stage where it's quite busy. But that's just a little bit about me.
Thanks. Stacy?
Hello, everybody. Thanks for having us for sure. And I'm from General Motors, so I am the Vice President of our Digital Business Technology. And so it's a newly formed organization focused on building the software products that support on-vehicle and off-vehicle delivery. So it's a great opportunity for us. We've recently pivoted into this role as of November, and so it's been a really great journey for me. I've been at General Motors about 14 years in various different roles within the IT organization, and technology is near and dear to my heart for sure. Like Christina, I am also a member of our employee resource group for GM Women, as well as advocating across some of our other employee resource groups to make sure that we, have a diverse thinking across the organization as a whole. So very excited to be with you today.
Awesome. And Mica, last but not least.
Thanks so much. Pleasure to be with all of you. Mica Mayo. I am at ServiceNow, which is a enterprise software as a service SaaS company. Pretty fast growth, and we are aiming, frankly, to deliver a consumer grade workflow experience in and at work. So many expect that. That's become kind of the norm in your personal lives. And that's what ServiceNow strives and has been doing quite well at delivering that experience for you at work as well. I have the honor to lead up the Digital Innovation and Transformation Group inside the company, which is striving to frankly simplify, optimize, and automate such that all of our internal employees can make sure that that rich experience is what is had with our external customers and partners. I've been with the company for 4.5 years, so a little less than my counterparts. But interesting, I bridge between. I have an MBA in finance, and I work like this, hand in glove with our IT organization to do what I do here. And I am also part and really, I actually lead one of our what we call Power of 10 groups. That's a internal women's network where you purposefully have a more intimate collection of folks, 10 folks that you just meet on a monthly basis to do some of what we are doing here. How can we advance on certain topics like advocacy and other, and do some of that shared learning? It's really important to me. I'm also a mother of a middle school daughter, and of course, wife, sister, etc.
Awesome. Well, we have, it's just so fun to listen to your backgrounds and how different they are, but that common thread of being an advocate for others and doing that in different organizations and making that a priority is just amazing. So let's get started. And why don't we start out with asking if you each could share a time when you advocated for yourself, how difficult or easy it was, and what were the results? Stacy, do you want to start?
For sure, thank you. And I think advocating for ourselves is so important. And I'm going to share a story where it was easier than I thought it was going to be, maybe is the way I'm going to frame it. So I'd been in a role a really long time. I had great success in it. I was a leader of an organization that was doing development within our finance organization. So from my IT side, supporting some of the delivery. But the role had been a little routine for me. So I had gotten comfortable in that role, and I had been there about 4 or 5 years. And I realized that in order for my growth, I was going to need to move to a different role. But really loved my team and I loved my boss, and being comfortable sometimes is nice. But I knew that I needed that growth. And so in order to move, I was going to have to tell my boss that I wanted to do that, right? So I was going to suggest that I need to leave that organization that had been, great for me, and he had provided a lot of support for me. And so you can imagine, like, I think all of us having a hard time starting that conversation. So would I say that it was hard? For sure. I was very nervous to have that conversation, but it became really easy. I thanked him, obviously, for all of the great support and the opportunity, but explained why I thought that I could add more to the company if I moved, and why other leaders underneath me then could have an opportunity to continue to move up if I moved out of the organization and took on a new challenge, both providing some value for myself as well as the team, and hopefully for the company as a whole. And I will say starting that conversation was difficult, but having that conversation was easy. He made it very easy for me, asking really great questions. I had a pretty good mentor who helped me put a plan together around what I would suggest might be an alternative option for me to continue to grow. And so I guess my story says it's okay to do. And sometimes the answer is now's not a really great time. I've had that happen to me, as well as I've executed that plan in different spots in my career. And that's an okay answer. And just because it's no now doesn't mean no never. So I think making sure that you're thinking about where you're going to grow, not just what you can, continue to be comfortable with, is a really important step in your career.
Sounds like the leader was quite a good advocate as well.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. Christina?
Yeah. So, similar to Stacy, mine is about a role that I took. So I had just gotten turned down for a job in the same, we have segments, and so I'll call it that, but in this segment, and I didn't get the first job, so I'd applied for a second job. And I was, a little discouraged going into the role, but I had built a lot of relationships and network in my current position that were encouraging me, just keep going, don't give up. So when I was interviewing for this new role, it was a big step from where I was before. And the hiring manager, he wasn't convinced that I had enough experience to do the job. And so that was difficult feedback for me to get, and it was actually in the interview. Because I had progressed pretty quickly to that point in my career. And so, the way I approached it was, to focus on building that relationship with him in that moment. I did speak about the qualifications that I had, but I was intentional about making him comfortable with the experiences that I had and how I could learn and grow into the role. And so it wasn't easy, but I was successful, and I did ultimately get the job. I built the relationship, and that hiring manager is still one of my biggest advocates today. And so it was because I was intentional about building that relationship and had built that strong network of advocates for me prior to that one opportunity. And so it really taught me a lot about how important it is to build the relationships, to speak up for yourself, be confident, and hopefully it works out in the end.
Right. And to have the courage to take the feedback and really figure out what to do with that, because that's how we get better. But I've had similar situations too. It's hard, but good for you. All right, Mica.
I'm going to share my first encounter of self-advocacy. So I'm going to take out of the workplace and go to the personal, if I may. I was very shy as a kid. My mother, to her surprise, was like, how could this be? As she's, interestingly, the opposite. And I was deathly afraid, you all, of actually taking money and going to the ice cream truck and asking for whatever flavor or style of ice cream. And so I wouldn't do it. And thankfully, my mother didn't cater to that or reinforce that and encouraged me to self-advocate by saying, if you want that, you're going to have to muster up the courage and ask yourself. And so I did some of the things that you heard, right, from Stacy and Christina. I had to muster up courage. I had a goal. Yes, I was aiming to then be intentional. I developed a plan and then I rehearsed my delivery. And I did, go and ask for that ice cream. And I have carried that with me ever since. So it doesn't come naturally, I'd say, to me, but I have developed that type of muscle through time, again, with those kind of 4 ingredients: courage, intention or goal, a plan, and then rehearsed delivery.
That's awesome. That's a great recipe for just about everything that we do, isn't it? Oh, that's wonderful. And so good of your mom. What a role model. What a way to push you. Yeah, that's wonderful. Okay, let's flip this around and chat about a time where you wish you would have advocated for yourself and didn't. And then how did that turn out? Missed opportunities or the like. So why don't we start? We'll stay with you, Mica.
Yeah, thanks, Anne. So as I mentioned, right, this was something that advocacy, self-advocacy didn't always come so naturally to me. That persisted, to be honest, especially early in my career, okay? And so what I would do is I would look at maybe a role that I wanted to get after or sought, to get promoted into. I'd comb through that job spec and compare, my history to what was written there. And I neglected to recognize when there were transferable experiences or skills that I had that maybe weren't exactly as, described therein, but certainly also applied. Additionally, maybe I looked at someone who was in said role before me, the role that I was aiming to take over, and did all sorts of critical comparatives and would actually doubt myself, both in terms of written compare or visual compare. And I did something that was against my 4 items, which is I didn't muster up the courage. Okay, I had a goal, I had intention. Maybe I would have then, lent to this kind of planning and rehearsed delivery, but I just didn't muster up the courage. And so I would wait until everything neatly aligned and all boxes checked, or I felt I was yes. And then frankly, you all, I was overqualified. So I missed an opportunity. I waited. I did not bet on myself. And so I'd say, yes, there have been times where I missed opportunities because I failed to really recognize when there's something that I have experience in or past, honed skills that do transfer. And frankly, not all two people are the same. So think of the metaphor of cooking, right? You get a recipe. You maybe have some of the ingredients, but not all. Can you still make a delicious meal? Of course, with certain substitutions, and maybe you can make it better than that darn recipe. Yeah. So I encourage everybody to really make sure that you recognize and you bet on you.
Love that. There's a lot of research that shows that that's a very strong tendency of a female to make sure that they, 100% of the requirements for the job or the qualifications are met before they'll put their hand in the, hand up and say, hey, could I please be considered? That's not always the case with males, at least. And so I think we are so hard on ourselves. Bet on you is great advice. So thank you. How about we do you next, Christina?
Thanks, Anne. Not sure how I can follow that because she's so great. For me, I would say a few times in my career, there's been those new assignments that I went into where I was at a new table with new peers and I was very intimidated. And there were times in those meetings where I felt, hey, you got to speak up. You have something to add. You have a perspective that will, advocate for yourself or advocate for the people on your team. And I was quiet. And, this even happened recently. And the first time I actually spoke up in the meeting, I could hear my voice shaking. And so what I learned from those experiences is, you are in the role for a reason. And, you were put there because of your experiences and what you will bring to the table. And so be confident to speak up for yourself in those meetings. I recently read an article about how it talks about really challenge your inner thoughts. And I found that resonated with me because a lot of times it's self-doubt on my part for me to speak up and advocate for myself or advocate for people on my team. And so I have found in my career that, really challenging those thoughts and building the relationships outside what I would call team meetings where you might not be as comfortable speaking up. Build those relationships so that when you're in the room, it's like you're just talking to the people you talk to outside. And so that's been pivotal for me in my career, is really challenge where I'm doubting myself and really focus on building the relationships outside the meetings.
Yes, that's so important. Because people will see things in you too by your questions that bring out maybe a superpower that you didn't even know you had. But if you don't have the courage to ask the question, and you're probably not the only person in the room with the question, that never gets seen. So love that advice. Thank you. Okay, Stacy.
Yeah, that was both fantastic for sure. And I do think, to your point, Anne, I think that we have more influence than you think that you have. And I would say that your team and your peers are counting on you to provide that perspective. So when we think about having diversity at a table, like you mentioned, Christina, it means that everyone's voice has to count, and you represent a slice of a diverse thought that's really important in that conversation. So it's really necessary for us to make sure that we find that courage, I guess, that you were talking about, to make sure that we bring that diverse thinking to the table. And so you have more influence than you think, I guess, is my message to everybody. So any type of moment that you might have that says, I'm not sure that I want to, remember that you're representing more than yourself in that particular conversation. So it's really important that you use your voice.
That's excellent. Excellent. And, we've talked a little bit about the relationships and how important that is. And, you've got those trusted people who, if you're using your voice and you're being vulnerable, that they're going to have that radical candor, that care, and being really honest with you to help you, move forward from there. So maybe we'll pivot to relationships. And I think, Christina, you mentioned relationship capital as part of part of your story about advocating for yourself. Can you talk about how you approach that, and what are you doing to keep those strong and build those strong relationships?
Yeah, I definitely believe that relationships are pretty much the only way that we get things done today. At least that's my perspective, right? Sure, there's processes that come from, we manufacture a lot of products, and of course there's processes, etc. But relationships are critical to getting things done. And so the role I'm in now, which I started last year, has everything to do with influencing others to achieve results. So it's really challenged me in this area to hone the skill set of relationship building and intentionally building my network of key stakeholders. So one of the things that I've done is whenever I take on a new role, or whenever you're even if you're joining a board in the community, or just anything personal, I always build out a stakeholder relationship map, because to me, this helps me prioritize the relationships and where I invest my time. So I'm very thoughtful about the touch points with those people. I have a very direct leadership style. And so I have to be really intentional about this point, about building the relationships, making the time for the people, and putting in the effort to remember the things that are important to them. So I'm really intentional about it through that stakeholder map, really understand the time it takes to invest in these relationships, and making sure that I'm nurturing them and being genuine.
Mm-hmm. It takes a lot of time, but it's really, it pays off. Definitely. So Stacy or Mica, any other thoughts on relationship building?
Maybe I'll just, that notion of understanding that influence map is something that I subscribe to and always have. Different than an org chart. This is a relationship map, and how are things, connected. But as someone who is driving internal transformation, which means you've got to change, right? Transformation is, you can't go back. You're moving forward, and the new behavior becomes, said norm. There's also there's a huge amount of resistance to that. And devoid and absent relationship capital, you won't get there. There's no such thing as digital transformation absent the human kind of acceptance and that personal transformation, if you will, the people component. Human connection is at the center of that. And so just encouraging folks to put in the time. That's not something that you get by, a quick connect, episodically. This is developed over time. It's a trust that is developed. And I love our CEO's quote, "You earn trust in drops, but you lose trust in buckets." So you've got to kind of continue to refine, to hone those human connections and relationships. And so please don't ignore the importance of that time and focus.
I mentioned a little bit in the opening about transitioning to hybrid working environments, and being part virtual, being some in the office, etc. And one of the things that I got the privilege to do a session like this with Romy during COVID, and we talked about how to advocate for yourself in a virtual world. And one of the things was to really show up and to be on camera, to make sure you have those regular touch points, making sure that your managers know what you're working on and what you've accomplished. Tooting your horn a little bit, which isn't very comfortable for many of us, but wondered, maybe throw this out to all of you. Do you have any recommendations for advocating for ourselves in a hybrid or remote, or kind of this, varied new environment we're moving into?
Maybe I'll piggyback on, it's hybrid. So you're going to have now folks that are both in person and virtual. So it's important that you both advocate for self, but also encourage and advocate for others. In a leadership capacity like I have, recognizing that some folks are going to continue to be, joining virtually, yes. Important to make sure that you give space to allow for folks who are not in the room to then have opportunity to join in, participate, and share their thoughts and the like, and opine. Yeah. If you don't do that, it's very difficult to just discern body language or recognize that there's a comfortable pause where you might then be able to, join in without interruption. So we all need to be sensitive, empathetic to those who aren't, in the room, and make and create space. What I also do in this regard for folks that maybe are a little more reserved, when you have had maybe outside the meeting, right? Like you said, Christina, sometimes you're developing outside relationships, yes? And that helps when you're in the larger group. Here, if there's been, some real thought leadership that you've gleaned from one of those outside of room conversations, definitely pay tribute, call out. Oh, right, I was having a conversation with, X, Y, or Z, and here were some of the thoughts that she shared, or other suggestions or recommendations that she made. So I think that's another way as a leader, we can encourage kind of this mix of folks either being hybrid or perhaps even paying homage to those that maybe are a little bit more reserved and not so aggressive at making sure that their voice is heard.
Great point. You have to pause a little bit longer in a virtual world. And you actually have to try to pull it out of people, because it's much easier to just sit back and, not participate in the conversation. So thank you. So, one of the things when we were talking about this topic before, Stacy, you had brought a comment around things that, we can expect from our male counterparts, and some expectations around that I thought were really interesting. Would you mind sharing?
So I think a lot of our male advocates, so if we're talking about male advocacy in general, I guess I would say a lot of our male colleagues really want to advocate for us and don't always know how to best do that and support us in various scenarios. So I think it's really important that we make those connections and help them see ways that they can support us and provide, honest feedback for us for growth, giving us constructive feedback as we continue to develop. So, again, it's back to relationships that we started on before I dropped. I apologize. But I do think that building that relationship and having them help us kind of guide as we go is really important. It's a foundational element that we all work together to continue to advocate to bring our whole self to work, which I think is really important.
Yeah, definitely. And one of your comments I remember was making sure that our male colleagues are giving us that critical feedback, that constructive feedback, so that we can really understand what's being, what's there for us and what we can do better and help that.
Right. Exactly. I think sometimes you hear, anytime you get feedback that feels maybe shallow, meaning short in depth of comments, you're doing fine. Keep doing what you're doing. That's not enough. You need to be able to go further. So ask the follow-on question. If I just keep doing what I'm doing, I'm not going to continue to grow. So please give me, a couple of constructive elements that I can add to my repertoire, if you were, of how I continue to grow as a leader, as an individual contributor, or, in a different, capacity within the organization. So, transformations personally and professionally take, everybody helping. And so really asking for that follow-on feedback is really important.
Awesome. Other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think good points by both. I think one thing that I think about a lot is we have to be intentional. So we gave examples of how you could, advocate for others or maybe advocate for yourself, but we have to be intentional about doing both of those. Think back, I definitely have a hybrid team, various time zones, and there is a proximity bias that I have to make sure that I call out and intentionally overcome. And so I think, we have to be intentional, whether it's about advocating for ourselves or others, and do it consistently.
Mm-hmm. part of it's on our to-do list. It's not something that happens just because you're in the moment and it happens. It's on the list of things to do. Maybe we could talk a little bit about ways that you are helping others advocate for themselves. They're different. I mean, you all mentioned I'm sponsor our Women's Empowered group at RBC, and that's what that whole group is about. You all mentioned different groups that you're sponsoring too. What are some of the things that you're doing? Because it's so important that women help other women. We're not in competition with each other. We're in collaboration.
I think that's a great point. So I think we need to stop thinking that there's only one seat at the table and we have to compete with each other for it. There's every seat at the table that's open for anybody to be able to participate. So I think mentoring, coaching, and sponsorship are all a little bit different. But I think we all have a responsibility to do that. And mentoring means providing that coaching and that feedback. But sponsoring means really challenging where that person's going and helping them get to that next level. And so I think all of us, and I know from our pre-discussion, all of us are in roles where we do exactly that, provide coaching on a day-to-day basis in our roles, but really identifying people that we want to continue to mentor, women that we see that we want to sponsor. And taking on a sponsorship role means putting your credibility on the line, right? So our relationship capital that we talked about. So it means sponsoring them and saying, I'm vouching for this resource. They're going to be fantastic. This woman is going to change the course of the company because of their energy, their leadership, their ability to deliver, any of those aspects. And so building those relationships with other women to help them continue to grow is really important.
And Stacy, I love that because those are three different roles. A mentor, a coach, a sponsor. Those are different. We have a purposeful kind of, and it was organically grown, this Power of 10 network at ServiceNow, which I just love. So it's a notion of you join with a group of 10 women. There's typically a VP level kind of lead, but there's a sharing. There's areas or topics that the group decides we want to kind of learn as a collective, and maybe refine some of those coaching skills or mentoring skills or sponsorship skills or self-advocacy, or what are some of the recipes to advancement, and have maybe guests come in. But you decide on topics, and then each kind of takes a turn on facilitating and delivering the discussion for that particular topic. So it's a way for us all to kind of practice, maybe also go deeper into an area of passion, and then doing that kind of sharing across. And interestingly enough, you do forge a pretty tight bond with your collective team. I have been part of this Power of 10 either as a contributing member or as leader since inception some 3 years back. So, even if you don't have, that type of program at work, you could organically, start something like that. And I think that it is a great way to do all of those things. Mentor, coach, and sponsor. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. We are nearing the end of our time, and I have been trying to weave in some of the questions from the chat through this conversation, but we have about 5 more minutes. So if there are any questions, please add them to the Q&A and we'll get them posed to the panelists. One that has come in is, what's a great way to make a great first impression?
I think I'm going to say energy level, right? So I think sometimes, and we've all talked about it. I mean, Christina, you said it too. Sometimes you're shy in a new environment, but I think high energy means that you're coming every day to work with a passion for what you're doing, that you're excited to be at whatever discussion you're in, whatever table you're in, whatever meeting you're in, and that you're there to work, you're there to learn, you're there to, collectively provide some energy to that meeting. And so I think having energy and showing that you have it, even if it's just the way that you greet people at the table, right? Good morning, good to see you, right? Even if you're on a Teams call, it's fantastic to see everybody. I think having that energy really excites everybody and make you feel open to be able to have a conversation with. You feel open to ask a follow-on question, and that openness that you project really gets the conversation started.
Mm-hmm.
energy breeds energy. I think storytelling as well. Messages are ones that resonate when it's provided as a narrative, as a story. And now this is not to, don't fake it. You need to be your authentic self. Otherwise folks will, see through, and it will be the opposite, the antithesis. But to the extent that you are comfortable, bring that energy, share through storytelling about yourself or what you're passionate about and the like, and that always will resonate.
Yeah, I think that's good, Mica. I recently attended a career management session, and definitely I agree with the point of, be yourself. People will very quickly see when you're not. But one of the things that they talked about is, what's the elevator speech about yourself? So I actually took the time to write that so that I have thoughts in my head about what I would say the first time I meet people, because a lot of times you don't get 30 minutes. So it was a great way for me to really jot down like what's important to me, and what am I doing today, those type things, so that when I'm in that situation, I have those thoughts that are genuine to who I am, to share with people.
What is it? Is it Maya Angelou that says people won't remember what you say, but they'll remember how you make them feel? I didn't get that quite right, but that's the overarching theme. So I think that's what you're saying. Be positive, passionate energy, and have them know that you care. Question came in from the audience, and I'll actually speak to this really quick. They asked, what's the best practice to get male colleagues involved in your women's employee resource group? And one of the things that we did is, I'm the executive sponsor, but my co-executive sponsor is a male from the, and he's wonderful. His story, Mica, is about how his mom would, go into the male tennis clubs, and, she was just a powerhouse, and he just feels very passionate about it. He's been wonderful, and personally has been reaching out to many other leaders. So we have, complex managers across the US, and has asked them all to join, and then asked them to ask others to join. And so the numbers have grown immensely, and he's just been an amazing leader and advocate. And I know we have to wrap here, but do any of you have any other thoughts on that before we close?
One of the things that I love that we've done at ServiceNow that I hadn't seen in some of my past companies, we do have annual, women's summit. And at ServiceNow, it is not exclusively women. We purposefully have and ask for men to join and be part of the summit as well. So I think the thread that's common between what I heard from you, Anne, and what I'm sharing is you definitely need to be inclusive. you do need both. Frankly, women advocating for women and men advocating for women, if we're really going to move the needle here with gender equality and the like. So be inclusive, encourage, and help, to educate and be more aware.
But Eaton, we recently did something called Ally Circles, and we had 3,000 participants, 300 circles, and it was hosted by a male and female ally leader. And we talked about the biases and unconscious biases in the workplace. And that was a great way, because it allowed the participants to hear from the various leaders, and a great way to engage the male allies in the employee resource group.
Thank you. Thank you all for your great comments, for your passion, for advocating for yourselves and helping and advocating for others. This was so wonderful, and I think we have a lot of good themes to take away. So.